right, well, oh, you're here. I was fixing to say I just got a text you on your way.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning. We're going to call the meeting to order. Glad everybody is here. The meeting this morning is that we're having the opportunity to interview two search firms in our pursuit of filling the vacancy for city manager. And we have two firms, Slavin Management, scheduled from 9 to 10, and Bob Slavin is going to be the presenter, and that is him, okay? And then we're glad you're here, thank you. And that from 10 to 11, Ralph Anderson, David Bosch, did I pronounce that correctly, Bosch? Is that Bosch? Okay, Bosch will be here. Oh, via Skype. Okay, so we're going to get to watch it on TV, is that or whatever? Okay. I'll ask if I could, City Secretary, to call the roll to begin the meeting.
Mayor Joe McComb.
Here.
Council members Rudy Garza.
Here.
Paulette Guajardo.
Present.
Michael Hunter.
Here.
Debbie Lindsay Opal. Here. Ben Molina.
Present.
Everett Roy.
Here.
Lucy Rubio.
Present.
Greg Smith. Here. Interim City Manager Keith Selman.
Here.
City Attorney Miles Risley.
Here.
Mayor and Council, a quorum of the Council and required charter officers are present to conduct the meeting.
All right. Well, you notice on the agenda we'll have the open discussion, and then there's also a provision for an executive session. And I'd like so before we start, Mr. Risley, if you'll kind of go over what we do in each one of those, and we may or may not need the executive session, but tell us, we've got it on the agenda if we need it, but tell us what we can and can't discuss, or must be discussed in public, and then what's available for us in the executive session.
Yeah, you may or may not choose to go into executive session. That's your choice. The executive session is only there in case you want to talk about the process or have legal questions about the appointment of the city manager or some part of the process. The executive session is not for discussing the relative merits of the firms that are going to be presenting to you. All of the discussion about the relative merits, about who is best, needs to occur in the open.
Okay. All right. Everybody understand that? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll since time is precious to us and we're a few minutes behind, we'll go ahead and get started. Mr. Slavin, you responded to RFP. Oh, yeah. Steve, you take it from here.
Okay,
sorry
thank you, Mayor.
That.
Yeah, you've kind of highlighted most of it, Mayor. So good morning, Mayor and Council. Stephen Vieira, Director of Human Resources. As the Mayor mentioned, the purpose of today's special council meeting is to conduct public interviews for the City Manager Recruitment Services. The interview format will be 30-minute presentation followed by a 30-minute question and answer period if needed. With that, we have two firms that will be presenting to you today, and our goal is to have the council select one of the two firms to proceed with the City Manager Recruitment Services. The first firm that you will hear from this morning is Slavin Management Consultants, followed by Ralph Anderson and Associates. With us this morning to kick things off is Mr. Bob Slavin, and he is accompanied by Mr. David Krings. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Slavin.
Mayor McComb, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. It really is an honor. It was a competitive process. We've got a lot of good competitors out there, and I was particularly pleased to be chosen to make the presentation this morning. I do have a PowerPoint, which I'll use primarily as a guide, but I really very much would like to see this become a conversation rather than a presentation. I don't think I need a half an hour. If I become too windy for some reason, then let me know. So, Dave Krings is with me, and Dave has worked for us for like 10 or 12 years now. He's got quite a history in the business, which is part of the PowerPoint, so I'll get to that when we get to that. So I'd like to begin the PowerPoint. We are Slavin Management Consultants. Most of what we do is local government recruiting. We do a few other things. Let me see. Can I? Yeah, I thought I did that. Oh, there we go. I beg your pardon. Now that I know how to do that, that shouldn't be a problem. Our practice is national. We worked in 46 of the 50 states. Primarily, we do executive search on that in that field. I run that part of our business and spend almost all of my time either working on assignments or and a very small percent of it, probably less than I should spend running the company. And we do pay and classification studies, we do some performance appraisal work, and we do some organizational studies. We're specialists, however, and people know us around the country as executive recruitment specialists in local government. We're headquartered in Norcross, Georgia. The reason for that, frankly, is not because of any great love for the South, although I do like where I live. It's because of the airport. We, as I mentioned, have worked in 46 of the 50 states. From that airport, we can get to and from most of the places in this country without stopping someplace else. And a lot of those clients we can serve by on day trips. So that's the reason for that. Project team that we have we're recommending for this search is myself and Dave Krings. You probably won't see either of us without seeing the other. We will co-manage the search. I'm responsible for it. I've worked for the city before, but Dave is a colleague that I'm quite proud of, and he's completely reliable. And one of the reasons for having two of us is because if something happens to one of us, you've got the other. And we work together seamlessly. So Dave has been president of the International City County Management Association, the County Managers Association. He's been a city or a county manager in Montgomery, in Hamilton County, Ohio, which is Cincinnati, in Peoria County, Illinois, and been a deputy in Ramsey County, Minnesota, and other assignments. He's well-known, well thought of, and internationally known. Barbara Lipscomb, who's not here, just joined the firm. She's been manager in a number of places. The last city manager assignment was Greenville, North Carolina, which is a college community in the northeastern part of North Carolina. I had placed her there. She's outstanding. She offers some diversity to the team, but also absolute quality in terms of her background, advice, intellect. I'm delighted that she's joined the firm. She happens to live near us in Atlanta. She couldn't be here today. Otherwise, she had a scheduling conflict, so otherwise she would have been here. I began doing this work after spending 12 years in city and county government management, well, up through the ranks to management level. And I've been doing this since the late 70s. During the course of my career, I've either placed or been responsible for the placement of more than 850 executive level local government officials, including some here in Corpus Christi. Our list of clients is in the information you have. Any question about that, I'll be happy to answer. We're very pleased that our work has resulted in 95% of the people we've placed, of that 850, have remained in their jobs a lot longer than the average 5 years that city managers remain in their job, and it's extensive, and some of them extensively more than that. And we'll get into why I think that is the case in a few minutes. Approximately a quarter of the people we placed are from protected groups, either women or minorities, and that's another thing we're very proud of. I should have adjusted this slide a little bit. I will manage the project. Dave will work with me, and I guess that's an honest statement, but he will be very much involved in this process. It's almost a co-management arrangement, but you'll see a lot of him, and his expertise in this field will be of great value to the process. I've talked a little bit about him and about Barbara Lipscomb, and I won't repeat myself. I've also talked a little bit about where we're based, but we also have affiliates or offices in Arizona, California, Connecticut, Florida, Ohio, and a small presence here in Texas, which I can get into maybe it'd be worth talking a little bit about that. We have an affiliate in Dallas who has worked for us for probably 15 years. At the moment, she's not available to us. She's taken a job with a small company, and although she could be working for us, I would have to sign a contract with the company she works for. She would become a subcontractor. I've looked at some of the arrangements that would have to be made to make that work, and I'm not comfortable with it because she would be working for her company and not for you or for me. So I'm hopeful that she'll become available again to us because she's great, but right now she's not available. Texas clients over the years include Austin, Bryan, Corpus Christi, Corinth, Dallas, the Dallas Unified School District, DART, Denton, DFW, Fort Worth, Lubbock, San Antonio, and Waco, and I might have left one or two out, but those are the ones that whose names you'd recognize and for whom we have performed either city management or chief executive or deputy chief executive recruiting or police chief. Our process is designed so that the outcome matches your needs rather than comes off of a shelf that we have in our office. We spend a lot of time at the beginning of the process trying to find out what you need, or your needs are, and how those needs might be different from other organizations or municipalities that have the same or similar demographics, and different than might have been the case when we've worked for the city of Corpus Christi before. We spend the first part of the process and a lot of the resource that goes into it at the beginning, meeting with each of you, meeting with anybody you want us to meet with. I have spent time in this city days talking to people who are community leaders in different buildings around the city, either this one and some office buildings. We have talked to community leaders, business leaders, civic leaders, other government leaders and other governments, all of whom you folks or the members of this body chose for us to talk with. And whether we do that or not is completely up to you, but it adds tremendous value, and it helps us decide. It helps us learn more about this organization and its culture, the community that it serves, and so it's valuable to us. But we fully appreciate that we also talk with a lot of staff folks. We understand who we work for, and it's this mayor and council and nobody else. So you're in control of it, but to the extent that you would allow us to talk to some of your constituents and important stakeholders, we would like to do that. It's fit we're looking for, and as I indicated earlier, we have no preconceived ideas about what that is until we talk with you folks. And again, communities change and evolve. I've read a lot of current information about the city of Corpus Christi, and you're doing some things now that weren't on the list of things that you did when we worked for you before. So we'd want to talk to you a little bit about that, so that we understand what you expect the next city manager of the city to accomplish for you, given the resources that you have available for he or she to accomplish those tasks. We do a number of things to recruit. The most important thing we do is to outreach recruit, to actually network for people who we don't know, and using resources that we have and through people we do know. That's the rifle. Rifle. We also use a shotgun. We advertise in all the national publications, including those whose memberships are members of protected groups. We know people around the country from our work. They may not be people interested in the job, but they're people who know people we don't know. So we spend a lot of our time and effort outreaching to people who we either know and think might be well qualified and think might be interested, and to people like that who might know others. So the process is not just simply putting ads in the paper and waiting for people to respond. So that's the primary part of the recruiting phase of what we do. We evaluate all the applicants on the basis of the criteria you set, and we narrow the group down based on that criteria, and we get additional information from those who intend to meet the criteria that are closest, and that information is first by phone, and then extensive written materials from them in addition to the resumes and cover letters, and then we do site visits with them. So we actually go to their communities and meet with them on their own turf, and I'll get into that detail in a minute if you care, and in as much detail as you want me to. The whole idea, we want people who fit the criteria that you've established, and we do everything in our power to make sure that happens. The candidates are fully vetted. We do all the normal things: the criminal, driving, civil, credit, education verification, referencing, the internet, Google, social media checks, and all of those things that are available. So before you see them, we've done all of that work, and there should be no surprises. Once the group has been narrowed to about 10 or 12 people who we call semifinalists, we'll want to come back and talk with you folks and let you help. And there'll probably be 12, 15 folks. We'll want to discuss with you who they are, provide you information that they've provided to us, including this written questionnaire document that we'll have from them, which is pretty comprehensive and written against your criteria, again, not taken off the shelf in our office. And we'll want you to help us determine which of those 10 or 12, hopefully, if any, several of them, you're most interested in, and have you rank those candidates for us. Let's say there's 10, because it's an easy number to use. We'll want you to rank them 1 to 10. Assuming that you want to interview 5 or 6 people, we'll use that list in the order the council rankings have sorted it for us, and go down as far as we need to in order to assure the 5 or 6 candidates that you want. And then if somebody either takes another job or withdraws, we can go to the next one without having to come back and redo it. That's assuming there's no huge gaps in the scores, but that's a method that we have found very successful in making sure, first of all, that you're invested in the process, you know who the candidates are and you want them, and that we're working from an agenda that you've set, not one that we think makes sense, but you're invested in the process at that point. We will help you with the interview process, and that could be anything. We'll guide you through options. Obviously you folks need to meet with the candidates, but any involvement from staff or the community leadership or televised interviews or with them, whatever you feel you might want, we'll help you with. And I can't think of anything that makes sense that we haven't been involved in before. But again, all of that is up to you. This is your process, not ours. We can guide you. We can give you options and guide you through it. Well, once you select a candidate, we'll work with you, and typically it's with you, the mayor, and with the mayor and the attorney, and one of us to negotiate the terms and conditions of employment. I mentioned I should have. Thank you. I should have emphasized a little bit more on the site visit. Those site visits are done right at after all the other background work is done, and when we know the candidates are well qualified and interested. And we actually go to their communities and spend a few hours, half a day maybe, with them. Nobody knows why we're there except us. We're usually introduced as a consultant, but without disclosing what kind of consulting we're doing and for who. And we spend time in city halls and county buildings or wherever they're working, walking through their facility, walking down Main Street. We're interviewing them, but we're really watching and looking and seeing how they interact with the people that they work with and work for, and who work for them. By that point in the process, we've done referencing, and more often than not, their bosses know that they're candidates. So having said that, it is very often the case that we can talk with members of their council or their mayors and do it in confidence. So it's a very insightful experience for us. And again, what we're looking for is people who fit your needs, not people who we happen to like. So by the time you see them, we've gone through all of that. And that process is important and valuable, and it does do, on a positive side, helps us determine how well they fit your needs. And on the negative side, we'll exclude folks who we find or we have some questions about, or if in fact their style is different from what you're looking for. You know, as an example, if you're working with the city manager and you walking around the city hall and without being announced walks into a department, it's kind of interesting to see how employees react to that person. First of all, do they know him? Have they ever seen him before or her before? And secondly, what kind of a relationship we see. And when that happens in two or three different locations, we can get a pretty good idea how they respond, what kind of interaction they have with staff. And so that's, and if we walk down Main Street with them, it's kind of interesting to see who knows them and why and how and what kinds. Some of the best experiences we have during that process is when we have no time to talk with them because they're being co-opted by people who know them. And it's interesting to see whether or not those members of the public we can sense whether they're happy with them or whether they're major concerns or whether they're challenging them. Or it's very insightful. So. And you'll get the benefit of what we find out when we do that. We'll help you. I'm not sure we've done that here, but our proposal, as you may have seen, includes a provision whereby we will come back after the person has been hired and has been here for a month or so, and work with you and them to set, or he or she, to set performance goals, not city goals, but put you on the same page in terms of what you expect of the manager and the manager, and that's usually a dialogue, although you're in control of it. It's you're really making a commitment, and if you will, it's a performance goal setting, but it's kind of a contract that you're making with them and allows you something objective to evaluate performance against. We'll follow up with you folks and the new manager at 6 months and a year to make sure everything's going okay, and if there are adjustments that need to be made, we'll help you make those. We offer some guarantees that we haven't had to use very often, thankfully, and the 850 plus searches, I think we've used them 3 times. We've had to redo a search 3 times. But we'll keep working with you until a placement is made. If that group of 5 folks you interview, typically somebody emerges as a top candidate and you're able to put a deal together with that person. If not, we keep working for you until that happens. We'll redo the search at no extra professional fee in the event that the position is vacated within the first 2 years for any reason. And we've had to do that 3 times in the years we've been doing this, which is 40 now, I can't believe. One time somebody died, another time 2 weeks before the 2 years was up, a person quit. And the third time was when a council hired somebody, and then and then there was an election, and when the person started, the council was different from the one that hired him. And it wasn't the council that didn't like the candidate, it was the candidate that didn't like the new council. So he quit. And we did it again. We will not actively recruit any employee of the city for at least 2 years. The clients are 2 years, and almost we kind of honor that commitment for a lot longer than that. If somebody in the city government is interested in some work we're doing, we'll ask them to make sure that that they know that you folks know that they initiated the discussion. We will never recruit anybody replaced. Process typically takes 90 days from the time that we have authorization to begin to do the recruiting, and that is at the point in time when you have approved a recruitment profile and an advertisement. That takes place after the initial meeting. We want to keep this moving because it's been our experience, particularly recently, this field has become very competitive. We want to keep it moving so that when we get good people, we can move the process along so we don't lose them to somebody else, or just because we're waiting for some extended date. So what we have found useful in recent and have been using increasingly is to keep a process open till filled, and then to monitor their success. And when we feel we have enough quantity and quality, we'll suggest to you that we move forward, but we keep the recruitment open. If that works for you, then that may be something that that would work well here. If it doesn't, that's your decision. And sometimes our clients require a final filing date. If that's the case, we'll use that. But process, a point I'm making is that we need to, in this day and age, we need to keep these processes moving so that we can be responsive to candidates who are good. We're prepared to begin the work within 15 days. Of entering in a contract with the city, and that shouldn't be too difficult. At least I don't anticipate any great difficulty with that. It's probably taken more than a half hour, and if you folks have questions, I would love to have either of us or both of us try to be responsive to them. And thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I can speak for myself. I've never been in a position to this before. I've been through searches, but it's been a number of years ago, and I wasn't the mayor, so this is all relatively new to me. I've been on pastor search committees before, and that's a little different. But,
Yes, yes, I imagine.
Anybody have any questions? We'll just go in the order they show up. Ms. Opal?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Looks like you guys enjoy what you do.
Yes, we do. I'm glad that shows.
Yeah, I was just getting tickled. I think your favorite part is to sneak into the cities and see what the response is.
Actually,
you look a little bit like a detective.
And not get somebody fired. That's
and not
right.
get somebody fired in the process. Well, I guess that's very thoughtful of you.
Yes.
One of the things that I did find very intriguing about your proposal is the follow-up that you provide. Now, you mentioned on some of the hires that you've done here in Corpus Christi, we didn't reach out to you to do that, or
it was discussed when Mr. Olson was hired, but we had talked about it. I think the mayor was Mayor O'Dami. It never got into a formal request to come.
Okay, so we just need to make sure, should you be the firm selected, that we have some sort of tickler system that we would definitely take advantage of your knowledge and experience.
It costs you an airline ticket, and nothing else. So, and it's well worth doing it. And it surprises me when people don't do it. It was something that was on the radar screen here. There were some other things going on in the background that involved requests for information from the press. There was a whole bunch of things going on. I don't know how it got lost. It got lost at this end, but we were on. It might have even been scheduled once, but it didn't happen.
Okay. So then the second thing is that with your expertise, would you be in a position to advise the council relative to the market? So I have a little bit of an HR background, so from a comp set standpoint, are you going to would you be in a position to help us parse through that?
Yes, what I'd want to know ahead of time, and a lot of that is the market, and it changes, and it's as you know from your background, it's the challenge is to make sure that oranges is an orange is an orange is an orange, and that when you have data that it's really comparing the same things. So I'd like to suggest that we use the Texas Municipal League for any survey information they have, and look, and in addition to that, talk to folks in Texas about what they're making. Corpus is a different market than a lot of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So the other thing I'll say is that once we know what you're looking for and take it to the market and start getting responses, we will know from the people interested in the job what they're making. Doesn't mean that you have to pay them. Well, we'll get people who are making less and people who are making more. But it doesn't mean you have to pay what they're making. If somebody's coming from Palo Alto, California, they're probably making close to $500,000, and I don't know that that's the case, but and that position will soon be available there. But and the cost of living is so much higher that you got to factor that in. The other thing is that about that is that again, it's something we've learned recently, and with and increasingly committed to not advertising these jobs with a number, but knowing from you folks, our conversations from you folks, where reality is, so that we're not leading either a candidate down a path that's going to be frustrating, or you but rather leave it open. If you put a number out there that's too high, then you're not going to pay anything less. If you put a number out there that is that you're willing to go a little bit more, the person and the best qualified person would need a little bit more. We'll never see that person.
Sure.
So I'd rather leave it open and know what your thoughts are about
and
it.
then the last question I have is something that you alluded to, which is the market for city managers. Are we? I mean, is there a market out there? Because we're this is a really full-on search to be able to really do the next level for Corpus Christi, and we sort of got some feedback that there's concern about having qualified applicants in the marketplace. Or is that fair? Or?
It's tight. I've been doing this for a long time. I remember doing Dallas when I worked for Korn Ferry many years ago and getting 150, 200 resumes. And at that point, when you ask any city manager, no matter what level of their career they were, what their career goals were, was to become the city manager of Dallas, Texas, because at that time Dallas was the largest city in the country with council manager government. But even having said that, the numbers are now more like between 20 and 40, 20 and 50 total resumes, including those that aren't qualified. The good news is that we're getting the quality. The bad news is we're not getting the quantity. This city ought to be able to attract, but it may mean knocking on some doors. I mean, if anybody just looks at the place and where it is and how it's situated, it's gorgeous, and it's got texture to it. It's got some challenges, but it looks like you folks are in on the path to acknowledge that the challenges are there and to resolve them. It's who can beat the Gulf Coast? And you've got a healthy business environment. You've got good schools. You've got two major higher institutions of higher institution, both around 12,000 students. You've got the demographic diversity. It's a big city. It ought to attract. So I'm not, and it has before.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you for that, because we would let you go on another 20 minutes bragging about our city, but I'm sure there's some other folks who have some questions.
One of the reasons I'm here is because this was a difficult arrangement for us to be here this morning, but there was no question when the invitation came that we were going to be here.
Hey, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a couple quick questions of the SMC on slide 5, the SMC Texas clients that y'all have. How many of those were city managers that y'all?
I may get to that page. The city manager of Austin. It's been a while, but we did. Brian, here, Corinth, Dallas. The Dallas Independent School District was an associate or an assistant superintendent. Dart was a finance director. Denton was a police chief. DFW was a finance person. Fort Worth, auditor, which was a council-appointed position, and other positions in Fort Worth. Lubbock was the city manager. San Antonio was staff. Waco was city manager.
Thank you. How long have y'all been in Texas?
I've worked in we had a presence here for about 10 or 12 years. That's what I was discussing earlier. Mm-hmm. She's no longer available to us.
In Dallas.
Hopefully
right.
That's temporary. In answer to your question, I've worked in Texas ever since I started this. One of my history is that when I began doing executive recruiting for governments, there were only two organizations in the country that did it. One of them was the company I worked for, which was Korn Ferry International. We were based out of Los Angeles, but we worked nationally. The other was Paul Reumann Associates, based out of Chicago, who worked nationally out of Chicago. Those two firms, because we were the only two in the country, were sharing the business, and particularly business from communities like this that are large. And bottom line is that I worked for Dallas first worked for Dallas when I was at Korn Ferry in the early 80s. And we did a number of things for Dallas. So.
Because we have a little bit different environment in this state, don't we? I said we have a little bit of a different environment.
Texas is different,
in the
yes.
state, yeah.
Yes, it is. But you know what? So's every place. If you just you have to get adjusted to the laws and to the culture. And a lot of that has to add to the unique characteristics of the state, certainly, but more importantly, to the unique characteristics of the municipality. And again, I can't emphasize enough that what we learned when we did the search that brought Ron R. Olson here is I won't even look at that material because it's changed. And you folks are in charge now, and it's you folks that we're more interested in talking to, not resurrecting something we did before.
Good, thank you. I think that we're glad to hear that. We appreciate that. Number 8, slide number 8, says we will keep working for the city until we will read. The third bullet point, we will never recruit your new city manager from the city. This, I had to step out, I'm sorry, for a quick minute when y'all were going over this slide. Is that modifiable, or is that what y'all always do? Do y'all ever not?
We will never outreach to anybody we place ever. It doesn't mean that our work is in the public domain, so they're welcome to reach out to us. But when they do, if they do, it's before we'll talk with them, they need to come to you and say, we want to go for that. And then we'll come back to you and ask whether that happened.
Okay, just checking on that. And then I guess that answers my next question, and I appreciate it. Corpus Christi is, you saying, well, on what we want. Just to give y'all an idea, Corpus Christi is a small, big city, but we're on a historic timeline right now. A lot of momentous things are happening. We have the 4th largest port in the nation by many, many different standards, and over $60 billion being invested in this area, 55, I think, around the port. So I think we're willing to do what it takes to get the best person.
That'll be very helpful, and I read that, and I didn't realize this was the 4th busiest port in the country, and in terms of oil, and the 5th in the world, or in the United States, or something.
Number 1 in oil exports, crude exports, and number 4 in exports.
Yeah, amazing. And who knows that?
Nobody. But we're getting the word out.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you all very much. You mentioned that it's 90 days typically on there. We're going into the holiday season, so if we'd sign a contract within the next couple of weeks, considering the holidays, could you hold 90, or do we need to do more?
It depends on scheduling. Our scheduling is not so much an issue as yours and the scheduling of candidates.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we will, if we commit to something, we're going to try to make it happen, but if it means that we have to do something that sacrifices quality or the opportunity for the best outcome, we'll talk to you about it.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah.
On us, not them.
Yeah, Dave made a very good point. That's our goal, is to do it in 90 days. But it doesn't hold you to anything. Our mutual goal is to get a result that is the best possible result for the city of Corpus Christi right now. That's not to suggest that we are not going to honor the 90 days. We will. But if for some reason, whatever reason, we cannot make that happen, or candidates can't be here, we're going to let you know.
Okay, so if the holidays do interfere and could, yeah. So Prop 120, considering this time frame, would probably.
Probably. Yeah. But again, offsetting that is our need to make sure that we don't lose good people because the process is taking too long.
So
we balance a lot of stuff.
You have a balance.
Yeah.
You're okay. Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
Again, thank you for visiting us today.
You're welcome.
In the past, how many times have you went through the search process and ended up, or has this ever occurred, where no one was selected?
It's It's never happened that no one was selected, but it has happened where the first group of candidates, the final selection was not from the first group of candidates. And that's probably happened, I don't know, 10% of the time or less. And normally when that happens, it's because we lost people at the last. We scheduled 5 interviews and only 3 people showed up, so we're dealing with only 3. And then of the 3, 2 were acceptable, and 1, all kinds of things like that happen. Most of the time, a candidate is selected from the group of candidates interviewed by the, in this case, mayor and council, and we don't have to go further. I don't know, it happens rarely, but it does happen. And we're not going to try to make that work. If you don't happen to be excited and enthusiastically excited about a candidate, we're not going to try to force that person. They owe us nothing, we owe them nothing, we owe you. So the answer to your question is it rarely happens, but when it does, we're with you until you have a successful placement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. What has been your experience, and this again is coming from my experience in Pastor Search and some others, the manager, and if they're successful in where they are and they're really not wanting to go, but an opportunity presents itself, they've probably developed a pretty good team where they are.
Yes, sir.
In the city management business, do you see a tendency to bring a team with them, or to come in and work with the existing team that's existing at the new location?
I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to let Dave comment. It has not been practice for managers to bring their own team. It has been a practice that if there are vacant positions, that they'll fill them in, but on a competitive basis. I have seen examples of people following their bosses, not often. If you've, and in cases where which is frequently the case, where our clients are very impressed and value the people who are on the executive team, one of the conditions that are the criteria that we frequently hear from our clients is don't bring anybody in here that's going to mess this up. So it's not the case like in the private sector where a manager comes in and basically calls for everybody's resignation and then fills those jobs back the way he or she wants them to. That rarely happens. But Dave has been exposed to cities more than I have, and as president of ICMA, there's some ethics involved in that too. Let me let him talk about that.
Yeah, being a city manager is not like being the manager of the Houston Texans. The teams, more often than not, by far more often than not, the manager comes in and works with the professionals that are already in place. And I could say that from my background as both a city and county manager over the years. Usually the jobs that I took, and some of which I was recruited by Bob, it was just a natural fit. At one point, I took a job. I was the first, wasn't the first manager, but I was the first to be hired based on professional qualifications. And there were a number of folks in the administration who, frankly, they held the job because of who they knew rather than what they knew. And in that particular case, there was turnover, but there was turnover initiated by the people who didn't want to deal with a professional manager. So that happens, but that was not the. I wasn't brought in as a hatchet man. I was brought in as a professional, and that is really the turnover that I experienced was really an exception to the rule. More often than not, and especially you have a long history of professional management here, I'd be really surprised if something like that would happen here.
Okay.
Glad he made that point. That's I remember one client hiring me to find somebody who'll come in the city hall on the day he begins with a Thompson machine gun and let the staff have it. I turned that down.
Yeah, that'd be a little nervous. I just was asking.
Let me tell you one more story about Slavin. He had me interviewing for a city manager job one time, and I ended up being the top candidate. And had one last interview with the mayor, and the mayor started listing the names of the people that she wanted fired within the first couple of weeks of me being on the job. My exact words to Bob when I came out of that meeting is, "What the hell did you get me into?"
And she was a very sweet lady.
I did not take that job.
No, you didn't. That was never part of the criteria that they talked about. And she was one of 5. I don't know what she was thinking.
On and again, just from what I've heard, is that I really kind of like the process of you kind of doing the undercover boss or whatever you do there to go out and kind of see how these people work, because what I've found just in what limited exposure I've had is that, and I don't know how you sift through that, maybe in your experience you've been able to do that, is that I would think if you're getting 20 to 30 to 40 applications, when you're checking references and others, you may get a very glowing and favorable report, and that's based on the hopes that, yeah, this will be the guy and we'll get them out of here. How do you sift through that to make sure they're being honest with their responses?
We go back at least 3 employers in at least 10 years, and we're looking for consistency. I'm not going to tell you that we can't be fooled, but then we go and look at them and talk to people and observe how they interact. It's pretty obvious if somebody likes somebody, and pretty obvious if there's stress. So usually that's one part of what we do that helps us determine whether somebody's being authentic and whether the references are good. The other thing about references, we don't just stick with the list of people whose names are given. We have to get authorization to do that work under federal law. We can't do it without it. But we don't ask, and we do ask them who they want us to talk to, but we don't tell them that we're only going to talk to those folks. So I can't think of a good example from history, but if we're working for somebody and the candidate is a manager in a city that we have some pretty close connections with or know people in that area, or we'll contact those folks and tell them that we'll never quote them, but what do you think of this person? Or we'll talk with somebody who used to work for them and now has moved on. What do you think about this person? And usually get some insight there. Again, what we're looking for is consistency. And if we start not getting consistency, again, we work for you, not them. They're gone.
Okay. Ms. Opal?
There are several things that distinguishing us from our competition, and there are more firms now, as you pointed out. One of the things that distinguishes us is that site visit. You know, that site visit, we go in armed with having spoken individually with all of you to find the type of manager that you want. It's really the most important and sometimes most difficult part of the recruitment to find out, well, let's get the 2 extremes. You want command and control person, you want a collaborative person. If we get you the opposite of what you want, that puts our 2-year guarantee in jeopardy, and we don't want to put that in jeopardy. So we go, and Bob pointed out that we'll go into the community and say you want a collaborative person, and we walk through, and people clam up, maybe literally sometimes. I had one where they literally stood at attention. Well, if that's not what you want, that's not what we're going to supply. The same thing with, dealing with the people in the community. Having lunch with a person and having the various community people come up or feel free to come up and talk to the manager Well, that tells us a lot about the relationship and the community involvement. If you want somebody with a lot of community involvement, we'd like to observe that. And again, come back and show it, get you the person that fits the profile that you all tell us that you want. And then the next thing that I think distinguishes us from our competition, or at least a lot of our competition, is that guarantee. When Bob said, we'll redo the thing without additional professional fee for any reason if somebody leaves within 2 years. In a place where I used to work, one of my successors, the fellow died. Okay, believe me, yeah, we weren't responsible for that. But there was no question asked. I mean, we said, yes, we'll do another recruitment. And by the way, that community now is one of our, our best references. We'd be happy to provide you with that reference. Our advertising comes from the people that we worked with. Bob gave you a list of places that we worked, both within Texas and elsewhere. Call them. We want to leave here with you all seeing good things about us as well. I can't, we can tell you all kinds of stories and about our successes elsewhere, but frankly, we can't do anything better than have you talk to the people we've worked with. Do it. Talk to them.
Real quick, Mayor, I wanted to follow up on the question that you had asked. Isn't there a corollary? All right, so part of my dark history is I actually used to be a municipal employee. The city manager field has a reputation. I mean, it's a pretty small community. When you get to ICMA, a lot of people know each other. At the time, talent would follow the leadership. So we've got a couple of positions, director positions in the city that may be coming available. Is it still true that the managers have that reputation, that others in the profession, the government profession, know the talent of some of these city managers? Is it still that tight-knit profession?
Yes, it is. And, I don't know. The managers usually have a little more discretion in hiring senior staff than they do if there's some civil service or union protection. But, it's not uncommon that if a planning or a community development director position becomes available and somebody has worked for this person in a different jurisdiction in that role, that they might apply for it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean they get the job, but...
It is true that we're a tight-knit community. But when I was president of ICMA, we had 8,000 members from around the world. Now it's 12,000. We're the fastest growing, I believe, fastest growing form of government around the world, not just within the United States. So, I can't look at you and say, yeah, I know all 12,000 of these folks and we're going to pick in the best. But it doesn't take much to know somebody who knows somebody and find out, now, is this person, you've described what you want to have, you collectively have. Does this person fit that profile? So it's we both have been in the field long enough to, if we don't know the person directly, we know people who know the person.
That was kind of my point. It's like, it's not necessarily 6 degrees of separation. It may be 2 or 3.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
That helps in a lot of ways. It also helps with the background work. Somebody's going to know that person and they can access it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I think, and Steve, you help me, or Miles, that, we appreciate your coming down here. That's not too far out of Atlanta where you are, is it?
No, it's very close. It's a suburban part of it.
Only thing I remember about Atlanta is that everywhere you go, it's Peachtree something.
That and traffic.
You can go
and all those Peachtree streets are jammed with traffic.
You can, and you can drive 5 miles in a circle and you end up right where you started if you don't happen to catch the right Peachtree
If
something.
you're on 285, that's the case.
Oh, man. Well, we appreciate you coming down, and so we'll, if anybody has any questions, feel free to hop in, but we appreciate your comments. I think we all made some notes. We've asked questions that came to mind immediately. Then I guess we'll go through the second process in a few moments, and then we'll kind of banter back and forth as to see who we feel like would be the best glove for us to fit to try to fill this position. But the question, I think I understand what your response was, and that when I first saw this, I was a little concerned, is that when you're saying that you don't recruit anybody within the city, that's after the fact. In other words, and I think there probably are some within the city now that could express an interest and submit their qualifications. That doesn't prohibit anybody in your process from existing staff being put into the pool for your consideration.
That came from my days at Korn Ferry, which is at the time was the largest executive search firm in the world. One of the provisions, points of courtesy, they called it ethics, but it really was a business decision, was that they didn't recruit from their clients for 2 years. And the reason for that is pretty obvious, that because you get a lot of exposure to your client organizations when you do this work, and they didn't want people coming in there making a long list of qualified folks for other clients. I put that in our basically code of ethics because I think there's some value to that. Doesn't mean your employees can't apply for jobs we're handling, but we will not aggressively or actively go after, assertively go after them for that 2-year period, and for the manager that we place, never.
Yeah, well, I thought that was the case, but I just want to make sure and clarification.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, okay. Anyone have any other questions? Steve, do you got any, at this point, have any comments or summary statements you need to make?
Mayor, I've got a quick question. I think it's quick. I'm sorry. Thank you. How many cities in Texas are you actively currently working for right now?
None right now.
None right now? So we'd be the only ones?
You would have that distinction, yes.
Okay. All right. Just
We're
wondering.
anxious to provide that distinction to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we do have other proposals out, but not for city managers, for department heads. So that could change, but right now that's an honest answer to your question.
Just out of curiosity, just when you're saying you're working all over the country, you mentioned, Dallas was the largest city with the council manager form of government in Texas, I guess, or maybe it's in the country.
I'm not sure it is anymore, but it was.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, it's just a question, doesn't have anything to do with Corpus Christi, but in your exposure to all the different cities, on a percentage basis, is the strong mayor form of government versus the council manager form of government, is that a 60-40, 70-30 split? What would you assess that to be across the country in your experience?
The expert, he looks confused.
On the extremely large cities, the strong mayor form is more prevalent. Cities this size and smaller, that'd be by far the council manager. And you also find a lot of hybrids, right, where the mayor is directly elected and has, say, veto power or power to review the budget before it's submitted to council or something like that, but they still have a city manager. I can't give you a definite percentage because there's so many variations from place to place. Even within a state, there are a lot of variations.
Okay, thank you.
It's also true with regard to the way cities and counties are managed. In where I'm used to working, the council manager plan can be very much employed in a county as well, and I realize that that's not at all the case here. We have enough experience nationwide to know where there's a comparable in another state, a council manager that happens to be working in a county in another state may fit very well in with the council manager plan in Texas. So,
But a chief administrator from a county in Texas may or may not have responsibilities that would qualify he or she for this job.
right.
Because counties here are a little different.
Yes, they are. Yeah, okay. All right, Steve, kind of wrap us up for this session. We appreciate very much y'all coming.
Thank you very, very much. It was our pleasure, and we hope to see you again. And it's not my marketing tongue, it's my, I really, we want to do this work. So I would ask you to seriously consider us, and thank you so much for the time this morning.
Well, since your Braves are out now, you need to pull for the Astros.
I watched the Braves, well, that's what you said. They were defeated yesterday. They defeated themselves, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The Yankees may be in for a new manager for long, too, after last night.
Okay, Mayor, we are going to transition very quickly now. We'll be hearing from Ralph Anderson and Associates, and we'll be hearing specifically from their senior consultant, David Bosch. This, again, will be via Skype, and so we're going to see, hopefully that should be kicking on right about now. All right, we've got David on there. David, can you see us okay?
Yes, I can. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, you're on.
We good to go?
Yes, sir. I don't know whether you can see us. I'm Joe McComb, the mayor, and you can see the council here. We appreciate you taking time to spend with us today and talk a little bit about what you offer us in terms of services of recruiting and helping us find the perfect city manager. And so we look forward to your presentation. We'd like to, allow you the time you need to introduce yourself and your process and what you think you can do for us, and then we'll spend about the other half of the time asking you questions and trying to get in our mind exactly what it is or how we could work together on this. So you're on, and I think we've allowed about 20, 25 minutes to do that. And I'm not sure where you are, but right now it's about 6 minutes after the hour. The hour is 10 o'clock here. I don't know where you are.
Yeah, I'm in California, so 2 hours difference.
Oh, okay. All right.
Pleased to be with you this morning. I wish I could be there in person, but we'll hopefully use technology to bridge the distance gap. I'm pleased to present Ralph Anderson Associates credentials to you this morning. Do you have the PowerPoint in front of you on your screens there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What I'd like to do is go through that fairly quickly. If you want me to elaborate on anything that I touch on too light as we go, I encourage you to do that, and then I'll look forward to your questions at the end. So essentially, if you turn to the first page, Ralph Anderson Advantages, this is a firm that really has a track record of success across the country. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of the work we've done there in Texas, but certainly a world-class leader in executive-level recruitments. I've had experience working with Ralph Anderson over the course of my career, both as a candidate, pursuing opportunities, but also as a client, similar to yourselves, who really wants to ensure that I have the best firm working on behalf of myself and my city council. So I can speak firsthand about Ralph Anderson and the success they've had, both in terms of a national reach, but also a really tailored approach to really understand the culture of your organization so that, as you said, Mr. Mayor, at the end of the process, we really find the perfect fit for the city of Corpus Christi. I won't read the slide to you. It's there for your information. Again, happy to circle back to anything that's either in the printed slide or that I might touch on that we'd like to talk further about. If you then go to the next page, this is a little bit about who I am and what I bring to Ralph Anderson Associates. I've been working in local government for over 40 years now. Technically retired earlier this year, but had interest in continuing to serve local governments across the nation. And so as I thought about what I wanted to do next, I quickly found myself having a conversation with Heather Rentschler and Robert Berg about what I could bring to the firm And so I'm excited to now be associated with Ralph Anderson Associates and to undertake this project for you all. If we continue on, then what we bring to an assignment like this is a team approach. So while I'll be the point of contact 24/7 for your council, I have the direct assistance of both Heather and Robert as a part of my team. And then, unlike many firms, we actually do all of our brochures and research here in-house. And so we've got an experienced team of nearly 20 people here in the office who have, again, a real track record of success in finding the right candidates at the right time for the right locations. And so we really take a team approach. But let me be absolutely clear, unlike some firms that really tend to get more associated and enamored with their candidate pool, we work for you. So we are going to only bring forward those candidates who would be successful in Corpus Christi. We're not going to bring forward candidates because they happen to be known to us through other processes. This is really going to be a very focused approach to make sure that we understand the culture of your organization and that the person we bring forward and you ultimately hire is the very best we can find. Continuing on then, again, a little bit more about the firm. In business since 1972, our corporate offices are here in the greater Sacramento region, which actually makes it convenient for us to get anywhere we need to. We've got associates who work in other offices across the country to service our clients in a closer proximity. But out of our firm office here in Northern California, we're able to get on a plane and be anywhere in a couple of hours. And that obviously would be true of Corpus Christi as well. So let's turn the page and talk the results. That's what really it's all about, both in terms of the firm itself, but also our local governments today really measuring and tracking results. And so if we turn the page again, you'll see that our firm has worked in both the largest jurisdictions in the country as well as some of the smallest. Turning the page again, you'll see some examples of the really tailored approaches that we take. So in the case of a small jurisdiction like Alpine County, we really need to know what its attributes are, what its challenges are, so that we can do a match with their needs and find the right county administrative officer. And on the other end of the spectrum, we concluded a successful engagement for the County of Los Angeles. I don't think there's many jurisdictions that get more complex than it. So we really needed to understand what they were looking for in their city manager or their chief executive officer in this case. If we turn to the next page, then in terms of the work we've done in Texas, that turn the next page, you'll begin to see some of the work that we're currently engaged with. And as we look back over the last 5 years, we've undertaken and completed 35 different assignments in the greater Corpus Christi region of Texas. And so right now we're doing Brownsville. If you turn the page, you'll see that in 2016 we did South Padre Island. Turning the page further, we did McKinney, Texas. And then if you turn the page again, you'll see that one of our hallmarks is really repeat client business. And so we pride ourselves on really doing the best job we can because our reputation is based on success, but also repeat business. And so in McKinney, we're re-engaged with them to do another assignment. You turn the page, we're working in Austin. Again, turning the page further, you'll see that we've had some experience in the Corpus Christi area, having placed the incumbent at the Housing Authority about 7 years ago. Turn the page further, have worked in the city of Dallas, both in terms of the chief of police, but also a couple other high-level recruitments. And then turning further to the city of Denton, a list of several slides that just shows you the kind of work that we do and the kind of repeat clientele that we have. So deputy city attorney for for the city of Denton, Director of Parks and Recreation, General Manager, Electric Utilities, Police Chief. So again, Denton's been very pleased with the work that Ralph Anderson Associates has been able to do on its behalf. And then the last example I want to show is just San Antonio, Texas. Again, this is a current recruitment, latest example of the work that we're doing there. But we've also done other placements for them, the Airport Authority and the Housing Authority, for example. So again, a long track record of success working on behalf of Texas jurisdictions. So now let's talk a little bit more about Corpus Christi. So if you turn the page further, you know, a couple of nice photographs. The next page is really beginning to formulate the outreach and recruitment strategy. So we would work closely with your council to begin to really crystallize what are those key benchmarks that we want to use as we go about identifying qualified candidates. You know, where have they been? What have they achieved? What kinds of organizations have they served? And how relevant is that experience to Corpus Christi today in 2018? You turn the page again, kind of a hypothetical or an example of what we would work with you on, really coming up with a clear plan. So as we go out and seek qualified, good fit candidates, understanding what differentiates Corpus Christi from your point of view. Great schools, safe community, affordable housing, coastal location, outdoor recreation, and probably other things that you would want us to spotlight as well. So again, this is just kind of a placeholder to give you a sense of the kinds of framing that we would want to do with you to make sure that we understand your community and what you're looking for in your next city manager. Turning forward then, so how do we go about defining a profile of the ideal candidate? You turn the page, you know, we're all looking for Superman or Superwoman. But turning further, we drill down and really get into the specifics of what sort of track record of success are we looking for? What sort of experience, what sort of leadership, whether they have the kind of the requisite skills, but also a track record of accomplishments that we can rely upon. So in terms of strong financial background, not only in terms of budgeting, but also understanding enterprise funding, bonding, tax increment zones, you know, kind of the whole spectrum that comprises the complicated financial operations of local government today. Again, I won't read down the list, but these are the kinds of things that we would want to flesh out with you and get a sense of relative priority so that if you then turn the page, you'll see that then start to focus in on what are those critical core competencies for local government leaders today. And these are the, kind of the four pillars that we tend to focus on. So if you then turn to the subsequent page, you know, a well-cultivated self-awareness. And how do we know that when we see it? Really people who live their conviction, live their commitment to local government service, but, you know, who it's not about them, it's really about the jurisdiction. So it's not about their egos as much as it is about how effectively can they serve your community. Next, a compelling vision. Having that kind of long-term perspective, but as importantly, really knowing what it takes to set into most those strategies that are going to achieve that vision, so that it's not just a pipe dream. It's really something that can be realized, and being able to communicate that vision and really engage the community and the organization in accomplishing that vision. Turning on real way with people. How do you engage with the staff and with your council and form tight, effective relationships? Developing team-based approaches to the complicated interdisciplinary issues that our local governments face today. providing real-time feedback so that organizational improvement occurs on a continuous basis, and then really setting up a structure to mentor and coach our employees so that we can be growing our own talent within the organization. Continuing on, then, a masterful style of execution. How do you really effectively build consensus and adapt to changing times, driving for results, both in terms of how we measure those, but also tracking those over time so that we're really focused on continuously improving how the organization performs. Generating informal power, recognizing that leadership occurs at all levels of the organization and really cultivating that as an ethos within the organization, the decision-making, and ultimately taking creative approaches to complex issues. So that's just kind of an example of how we would begin to frame these core competencies that we are then going to identify and seek out as we begin the recruitment process. If you turn over, this is where it really, I think, becomes more meaningful for your council, because we would take time at the front end to really tailor this matrix so that not only in a kind of a snapshot way do you get a sense of what the candidates' backgrounds are, how close a match they are to Corpus Christi, but if you kind of scan over to that seventh column there that talks about vision, planning, economic development, that's where we're going to want to spend some quality time so that we really identify the key criteria that you're focused on and that we're going to utilize as we go about recruiting and screening candidates to make sure that they have the requisite skill set and qualifications that are a match for Corpus Christi. And we're also going to make certain that there are no potential barriers or impediments to their coming on board with the city if they're ultimately chosen. We don't want to find ourselves 2 or 3 months down the road with someone who we think together is the top candidate, only to find out that there's some problem with their coming to your city. So we want to screen that out early on so that, again, we only bring you qualified candidates that are going to be a good fit and can be successful in your city. You turn over, one of the things we want to talk about as we get into this is compensation strategies and what your thinking is along these lines. This is not a comprehensive list, but gives you an idea of the kinds of things we're going to want to make sure that we're clear on as we go forward. So looking at competitive compensation, we're believing that this will be both a regional and a national recruitment in order to field the strongest pool of candidates for you. There's obviously some associated costs with the interview process itself. So as we winnow the field down and we get down to the top candidates, we're going to want to talk about bringing them into town and making sure that they're, greeted warmly and have the best experience possible to know you and your community. We're also available to assist in contract negotiations, and with this business having become fairly volatile over time, oftentimes the top candidates are going to want to know that they're going to be fairly compensated and that we'll use some type of severance provisions. We've got model contracts that we use across the country that we can provide, but that often is a topic of negotiations. I understand that. Going in. Similarly, relocation expenses. If we are focused on someone from out of the area, oftentimes there's a negotiation around what type of reimbursement for relocation expenses might be involved. So again, just to give you kind of a look ahead, if you will, in terms of the kinds of things that we're going to want to have a little bit more discussion with you all about. If we turn over, again, just kind of a sample ad This is just something that we mocked up as a starting point. Again, we would tailor this based on the discussions we have so that it really reflects your organization, the culture in your community. And we would use this to turn over again in terms of kind of an ad placement strategy. So there's a number of publications across the nation that city and county managers tend to refer to. Our firm has a very robust website, and we have a number of individuals who come to it on a regular basis to find out what assignments we're currently engaged in. And so placing ads is a necessary part of the business. It's by no means sufficient. What we really rely on are the networks that we've established over the years and our ability to uncover those candidates who may not actually be active in the market, but who would find this to be a very attractive career opportunity. And so that's really kind of our value add, if you will. Continuing on, overview of the search process. Anchored at the front end with stakeholder meetings to make sure that, again, our understanding of your needs and expectations is crystal clear. Develop the outreach materials, a very aggressive personal outreach strategy that we would embark upon, and then on a continuing basis to screen those candidates as they come to us so that within 75 to no more than 90 days, we can be at a point of getting down to the top candidates for your consideration. To put a little bit more of a timeline on this, while we're coming into the holidays, which can create a little bit of a challenge for us, we don't see that as a problem. We can get going before they're here. We can do a lot of our networking work during the course of the holidays, such that if your council is interested, we could have the short list of candidates available to you in the mid-December sort of time frame. If you prefer to push that into the new year, we have that flexibility as well. So it's really a function of what works best for you in that regard. Finally, the last slide is, again, kind of a different format of the timeline. Oftentimes, top-tier candidates are going to need as much as a month to transition from where they currently are. So we need to understand that in terms of the critical path. But as I said, we can have our work completed, and you could be in a position to make a choice within 2.5 months or so. So then we would need to then plan on that transition. And with that, let me just thank you for your rapt attention. I am happy to take whatever questions you may have.
All right. Anybody have some questions here? I will comment the picture there on your thank you page is the Brian Tumlinson's picture, and I got that hanging in my office. Did you take that from my office? So, but Mr. Roy.
Again, thank you for joining us. I do have a question. As far as according to your slide, you're looking at on-site interviews with the last 2 candidates, I believe. Is that correct? With the final 2 candidates?
Did we lose him?
Oh, we did lose him.
But that's really your prerogative in terms of when your council wants to see qualified candidates and how involved you want to be in that phase of the screening process.
Excuse me, sir, could you repeat it? We lost you for about 10 seconds at the beginning.
Sorry about that. So that's really just kind of a placeholder. Oftentimes we find that it comes down to the top 2 or 3 candidates, but if the council, either in a subcommittee format or the entire council itself, would like to see more candidates than that as we head down to that final phase. That's certainly flexible on our part.
So do you do any type of on-site interview with the potential candidates?
Yes, we do. It kind of depends on where they're located. So we'll absolutely be interviewing them ourselves as they come in. Sometimes we do Skype interviews. Sometimes we do telephone interviews. Whenever we can, we do in-person interviews, but it really depends on where the candidate is currently and kind of how that fits with the timeline that we're working within. But we absolutely interview each and every candidate. We do in-depth reference checks to make sure that who we see is who we know.
Thank you.
Mr. Molina?
Thank you, sir. Can you tell me, or can you go into a little bit more detail about your vetting process for the potential candidates?
Sure. So we would work closely with your council on developing that matrix that I mentioned in the PowerPoint to really ensure that we have a firm grasp on the culture of your community, the critical issues and opportunities that you're facing, and what sorts of experience would be the most relevant for the candidate to bring to your city. So we would be very clear about what those requirements are. And then on a continuing basis, as candidates apply or inquire, we would be vetting them against that criteria and then ultimately presenting to you a short list of the top qualified candidates, summarizing each of their experiences, obviously providing their cover letters, their references, any sort of responses to questionnaires that we might want to use, so that you'd have a complete package on each of the individuals who we believe are most suitable for Corpus Christi.
And one more question. Do you have a follow-up policy for after the hire? Do you reach back out to us as your client? And tell me a little bit more about that, please.
Yes, so we have a one-year guarantee on all our placements. So if something should occur and there's a transition within that one-year time frame, we committed to re-engage and to provide you with full services to get you your next city manager. We also find it very useful to reach out to those newly placed city managers to do a periodic check-in just to see how things are going and to be supportive of them in their transition. So we see this as being a commitment to your city that doesn't end with your hiring that individual. It continues on to ensure their success in your community. And
what is, when you say periodic, what type of time frame is it? 3 months in or 6 months in?
Oftentimes people think about the first 100 days as being kind of reflective of how well that person's gotten acclimated and has really begun to assert themselves in this critical leadership role that they play for your community. So we would do an earlier check-in, but then based on how well things are proceeding, we would kind of gauge it and probably do quarterly check-ins just to kind of take the temperature and make sure that things are in fact on course and proceeding as expected.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Opal?
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I bet you're glad we decided not to have an 8 o'clock meeting. We have heard that there have been some searches where they've gone out, they've looked for an applicant pool, and none of those applicants worked out. Are you guys committed to staying with it the long haul? Do we get one bite at the apple, and if it doesn't work out, we have to come back and renegotiate? Or are you sticking with us all the way through to the end?
All the way to the end. Our reputation is based on serving the needs of your city, and we're going to make sure that we're successful because we want you as a repeat client, and we want you as a good reference for us as we work with other communities.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mayor. How long, Mr. Bosch, how long have you been See, I'm reading your little bio here. It sounds like you have a pretty good relationship and history with the ICMA. What about TML? How long have y'all been there? And how long have y'all been working in Texas?
So I'm new to the firm, so I can't really speak to a lot of the history of the firm, but I could certainly find that information for you. But as I mentioned, over 35 recruitments in the last 5 years. So my guess is that we've had a long-established foothold in Texas doing work on behalf of its communities. The first part of your question was a little garbled. Can you repeat that for me, please?
The first part was just saying that I've noticed your ICMA tenure, and I was wondering about y'all's relationship or amount of time y'all spent here in Texas and which departments y'all were working with TML.
Right. So I've been a credentialed city manager for over a dozen years myself, and with that organization for over 30 years. I've been a lecturer at conferences. We're both focused on a national as well as a statewide level. So here in California, we've been very active in kind of the state association equivalent, League of California Cities, National League of Cities, and then also the California State Association of Counties. So we provide a lot of support to those professional and community networks. And then we're also constantly kind of staying up to date on best practices as it affects local governments across the country and there in Texas as well.
Sure. Well, thank you. Appreciate it, and thanks for being with us this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Could you brief us?
You're not on, Mr. Smith.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. In one of your slides, you have the city of Brownsville as one of your clients. Could you quickly brief us on what the status of that search is?
I am not sure what stage that's in, actually. I apologize for that. One of our Texas experts is managing that contract, and that's been in process for some time, but I could find out more precisely where that is in terms of the screening and presentation of candidates for the city of Brownsville.
Thank you.
But that would not impede or impinge on our ability to take on this assignment if that were of concern. We're fully prepared to devote 100% of our effort to this assignment.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Smith's last name. Just curiosity on the resume here. You state there his most recent position before joining Ralph Anderson. How long have you actually been with Ralph Anderson, and what was your previous position? Were you a city manager, a county manager, or private sector manager? Where were you before you came with Ralph Anderson, and how long have you been with them?
Yep. So I retired from Placer County as the CEO effective first week of January of this year. That's the jurisdiction that is about $1 billion budget and 3,000 employees. At that time, I began to talk with Ralph Anderson about joining their team, but I was drawn away. I was asked to serve as an interim city manager for a community that was struggling down in the Bay Area. So for the last 8 months, I've been serving as an interim city manager working for that community. So now I've wound down that assignment, and so now I'm working full-time for Ralph Anderson Associates.
All right. In the recruiting process that Ralph Anderson does, is it basically, or I didn't hear anything different. I'm assuming we saw a draft advertisement that would be published throughout the different organizations and associations of people that might be doing this. And is it is your pool of applicants pretty much a result of those that respond to the advertising that they submit their names for consideration?
No, sir. We do a lot of active outreach. We have contacts across the country that we'll reach out to. We'll take a really focused approach once we understand exactly what you're looking for. And then oftentimes it's, referrals from people that we know that we rely upon. So we have an extensive network of people that we've interacted with either in previous placements or through other involvement that we've had. So the running of the ad is really more of a passive approach. It's something that is still done in the business today, but is by no means the focus. Our value add is really our ability to uncover candidates who otherwise might not either be aware or currently in the market for a great opportunity like this one.
All right. And then just another question, if you, when you said, the recruiting of former applicants, I guess, or people position, I mean, do you have some type of policy that if you found us Mr. or Ms. Super person, and there was another city, and I understand, I'm sure in city management circles as well as private sector circles, everyone's always looking to move up the corporate ladder depending on the size of the organization. But if you find us Mr. or Ms. Super person, and 18 months later, another city opens up that is a little larger, offers a little more money, has a little more pizzazz or whatever, that can't be because Corpus Christi's got it all. But, I mean, do you come back and recruit? Well, I know we put a guy down in Corpus Christi or a woman in Corpus Christi, this would be great. But, this really is what they're looking for. It gets them closer back to their family, or this is where they're from. I think you can get them. Do you have some type of policy that you do or you don't do that, or is there a time period that from the time that they're put in Corpus Christi before they would be recruited by you to go to another opportunity that you feel like would fit their career path?
Yeah, so you make a good point. I mean, we're going to want to make sure that whomever we bring forward as a viable candidate for your consideration has a demonstrated track record of making a real commitment to their communities. We want to make certain that if they are ICMA credentialed managers, they understand that one of the tenets of that is that you have to go to a community with genuine intent to be there and make a contribution, which they typically look at least a minimum of a 3-year commitment. And then depending on the type of employment agreement or contract, while not necessarily binding, I think it's indicative of what the expectation of both the community and the city manager are in terms of long-term commitment to that community. So I've seen contracts with certain clawback provisions in terms of relocation assistance and some other things that would, I think, contribute to ensuring that longevity. But we're going to want to really vet those candidates that they don't have a history of jumping from one jurisdiction to the next. Frankly, I think the opportunity in Corpus Christi is a unique one, and that they're going to attract a really top field of candidates. It's a community that's got a lot going for it, a lot of interesting issues and opportunities, and I think we're going to really do well in terms of fielding a strong pool of well-qualified candidates.
All right. Well, in your experience, both in your professional experience and now that you've joined Ralph Anderson, we're looking for somebody that really is going to be a good fit for Corpus Christi, that's going to buy into it. This is going to be their home. What has been your experience both personally and professionally here in the recruiting business if you're looking for somebody, do they come and actually plant roots in the community, or are they just passing through? In that, when I say that, in other words, everybody here that's on the council, you know, we've plugged our money down, we bought a home, we've invested in this community, as opposed to going out and renting a place and just going to stay until we see if the wind changes. What is that? Is that normal in the city management business, that they invest in the community, or they just kind of take a temporary residence, see how things work out, and first door opens, they leave?
Well, both personally and professionally, I can say that most city managers really do want to put down roots and be a part of the community. I've had the good fortune of working for a number of different jurisdictions. In each place I've been, I bought a home. You know, I educated my son in the local schools. We shopped in the local stores. We really became a part of the community, even to the extent of, you know, my wife and I getting involved in different social organizations, charitable organizations, nonprofits, what have you. So I think, again, as we vet candidates for you, we're going to make sure that these are the types of people who are going to really commit themselves fully to your community, and not look at this as a stepping stone to what's next.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, I think that kind of wraps up our questions. Steve, who wants to kind of tell us where we want to go to wrap this up now? And then we appreciate you taking the time, and that you had to get up, well, I guess you had to get up early, I guess, in California, if you were here.
I'm an early riser anyway.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Bosch.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, so at this point now, I guess is your opportunity to discuss if you would like to, you also have the option to go into executive session if there are some questions you have for legal, that you have that option available to you as well.
All right. Remind us again, Miles, about what we need to discuss out here versus what we need to go in there. Do we? If you're, I mean, do we have to discuss out here A versus B, or do we?
If you are discussing A versus B as far as the search firms must be selected and discussed in the open. You're able to discuss the process for recruiting the city manager and issues related specifically to the employment of a city manager in executive session. When you're discussing anything between choosing between the two firms, that needs to be in the open.
All right. Anybody have any conversation or discussion that we want to have here, or if you feel like you got something we need to go into closed session? I'm flexible. We've got an opportunity in this meeting, and I think there's also one posted for our regular council meeting if either we run short of time or at this point we don't have the discussion we want. After we get through with the council meeting this afternoon, we can go into that. So we've got two opportunities. So Ms. Opal.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if maybe we need to do both. One, perhaps we could talk about the selection of the firm while it's fresh on our minds. And then once we've done that, to then step into executive session and talk about what the process would be in working with that firm. Because I think that there are multiple ways that the council would get involved or how this would move forward. And that would be a process question on the exact steps for hiring. But in terms of the firm itself, I think that having that conversation now to determine which of these firms the council would deem to be the best choice in moving forward. And then once we've identified that, to then, so that we don't stray into any concerns that Mr. Risley would have, and then to talk about what would be the next steps and how that process would work.
All right. Anybody have any comments that or observations, the reactions or responses based on the interview?
I would be glad to lead that, Mayor. If,
all right.
I work really well when I can matrix things out and determine how what's standing out for me. And I found that in going through, there were a few key things that stood out in terms of availability, the focus of the discussion and the search, the process that would be used, the experience that was going to be bringing to the table, and who would be leading that search. And, you know, two very good, very competent organizations to run this. Mr. Vieira, you did a good job, and, you know, where's our Kim's hiding behind you. You guys did a really nice job in being able to bring some talent to the table. But from what I saw today, I felt like that Slavin probably had the advantage on those particular dimensions, but those are the ones that were important to me. So there may be others that the council would have, but that's what I saw in these discussions.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Roy?
Yes, I think in terms of the overall approach and some of the things as far as the process overall, plus just the little bit of concern that because of the role that Mr. Bosch is fairly new in the position with Anderson and Associates, and I believe he indicated that he would be the main individual working with us. I felt like Slavin was a better choice. I like the idea that some of the things that they do in terms of going on site in their environment, they just seemed a lot more thorough.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
I agree with Councilwoman Lindsay Opal and Councilman Roy on that, the two excellent search firms on there. I like the fact that Slavin came here with it. It shows how much they want to be involved with it, and also a 2-year guarantee versus a 1-year guarantee. That was a marker, and they seem more interested, as Councilman Roy just said, of going on site and getting that face-to-face kind of look, that getting a feel of a person that you really can't elsewhere. So I support that also. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Molina?
I think we would win with either company. They both did excellent presentations, and I just felt like with Slavin, it was, I think we would get a little bit more personal attention. The fact that the president, Mr. Slavin himself, came to visit with us says a lot. And knowing that he would be in direct contact with us during this search, I think we would be served a little bit better for that. I do like the fact that we do get a 2-year guarantee as opposed to the 1 year. I'm leaning more towards Slavin right now, but I think either way we would win. So that's just my input for right now.
Okay, Ms. Opal?
So hearing that conversation, I guess there would be a motion in order to move forward with Slavin as the selected executive recruiter for the city manager search for the city of Corpus Christi, and I would make that motion.
Second.
All right, is that the appropriate procedure that we'd use to do this? And no, the salary is not a, help me here, when we sent out the RFP.
The RFP, correct?
They came back with a price.
That's correct.
That had a price in it, so we know what that is.
That's right.
And so that's not, I mean, I guess that's negotiable. That's what the price is.
Right. Okay. And that all of the firms, specifically the two that you heard from today, are within the range of what we spoke about already.
All right. All right. You know, I don't know that we need to make a really quick knee-jerk response, but I think we're moving in the right direction. Mr. Molina, you had that? Yes.
No, that was it. Sorry.
Okay. Well, Ms. Warlow, do you have any comment? Okay. I kind of concur with your assessment. I was a little taken aback in that Mr. Smith asked a question about the status of the Brownsville City Manager report or search. And from what I understand, I mean, that probably they're kind of on their second round of their process. But I was a little taken back, one, that, you know, that he didn't know where Brownsville was, and two, that he wasn't familiar with it. If he was going to, you would think if you're coming to recruit somebody in Texas and you advertise that you're doing stuff in Brownsville, his firm would have prepared him a little better for in case the question came up, knowing that their first group of names was not accepted.
Right.
So that kind of gave me a little, when you asked the question and the answer was, I'm not sure where Brownsville is. Okay. But anyway, any other comments? There's motion on the floor, and then I guess once that decision is made, then if we've got some process, then we can go into, once we've determined who we're going to dance with, we go in here and see what kind of music we're going to dance to. Is that kind of what the process is?
Yeah, you can give a motion of direction because the proposals are for less than $50,000. You can give a motion of direction to execute a contract with whatever entity you desire, and then, or in lieu of, you can go into executive session and talk about process issues that you still may have some questions about. Again,
so that would probably be a motion of direction to determine the process and then negotiate the final contract, I guess, is what that would be.
You could limit it to just the motion of direction on the choice, and you could, if you wanted to discuss process issues, how that might be specific to how you're recruiting, you can talk about those either in the open or in executive session.
All right. Okay, so the motion of direction is that we
select Slavin as the
select
choice.
them to negotiate a contract. And then we talk about process, because we may come up with a process that we think is wonderful and they don't, and then we say, well, then we don't want to pursue it. Is that a fair assessment of what might happen?
That's right. They may have something in mind, or they may have proposed something that might be presented through the HR director may indicate something that might surprise you, or that you want to.
We come up with a process.
About.
They may want to tweak it, and then we negotiate that back and forth. So you want to make it a motion of direction that we...
I would make that a motion of direction that the council select Slavin as the executive recruitment firm with which to proceed with the city manager search.
I heard to negotiate, so it's right? Is it a selection or to negotiate?
This would actually be a selection.
This is selection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the motion is select, excuse me, all right, well, let's get the motion down and make sure that then we'll talk about it.
All right, so the motion of direction is to move forward with selecting Slavin as the executive recruitment firm for the Corpus Christi city manager search.
And there's a second. All right, now for discussion, Mr. Smith.
For the record, Mr. Vieira, could you tell us what the contract value of that is for Slavin?
I believe shortly before Mr. Slavin left us, he indicated that the total cost of the contract was about $23,000 plus an additional $10,000 to bring in the potential candidates into Corpus Christi. So we're looking at about no more than $35,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Wardle, do you have no comment? Are there anybody else then on the selection of Slavin? Make sure I got the right name here. Slavin Management Consultants.
Slavin Management Consultant.
Slavin. All right. Any other discussion? You want to call the roll, Ms. Huerta?
Yes, sir. So for passage of the motion of direction, Mayor McComb.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Garza.
Aye.
Guajardo.
Aye.
Hunter.
Aye.
Lindsay Opal.
Aye.
Molina.
Aye.
Roy.
Aye.
And Rubio.
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right. And now, does somebody, do we need to go into closed session?
Well, Mayor, If we do, just, we would like to end about 11:15 if possible.
So,
That there's an opportunity, as you stated, to discuss it again in executive session during the regular council meeting if
well,
needed.
let's take this advantage of this 15 minutes that we have to try to set the parameters, and if we need to go into it later this afternoon, we will. So I need to make a motion. Wait a minute, where's my? You gave me an agenda for this meeting. Here it is. Is there specific wording I need to make, Ms. Huerta, on the going into the executive session?
Yes, sir. If you can just cite on your agenda the highlighted section, so executive session pursuant to.
All right. I'd entertain or we just go into executive session under
Yes, sir.
Texas Government Code 551.071 pursuant to the Texas Government Code 551.074.
Perfect.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
And we'll try to be back here within 15 minutes. special city council meeting to adjourn. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, entertain a motion to adjourn the special council meeting.
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the special council meeting is adjourned, and we'll be back at 11:30 for our regular council meeting.